Warhammer 40,000 Darktide's launch brings a bevy of people into the Fat Shark franchise of Tide games, perhaps for the first time. Whether you're familiar with the system by playing Vermintide or new to the series, the 4 classes that the game offers you on launch have 4 distinctly different playstyles. In this video, I'm going to go through each class on a high level to help you determine which class is the best one for you. Now, there truly isn't a best class right now, with there being no set meta yet. We are unaware of any particular broken feats, just whatever it is. This is meant to give anyone who can't decide a bit of direction. Unlike Vermintide, you can have as many of one class in a game as is allowed. You aren't limited by playing specific characters, so this vastly increases options for everyone. I'll show off some gameplay, discuss the class's playstyles, then conclude each section by drawing a comparison to other types of gameplay to help you determine if you'll have fun playing that class. You can quickly navigate to each one of the classes using the chapters in both the timeline and the description. And if you end up enjoying the video, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. I cannot tell you how much that helps out any content creator you watch. And I'll be covering a ton of Darktide content with a lot of build, weapon, general gameplay guides, all coming out in the next week or so. I'll be also streaming on Twitch with the same username I have here on YouTube. Find that in the description. But let's get started here on which class you should play in Warhammer 40,000 Darktide. And the first character I want to talk about is just simply the Veteran Guardsman. I think the one that a lot of people are going to be playing as, the Veteran Sharpshooter as it were. And you have a really cool character here that pulls directly from the Imperial Guard, the Astra Militarum, and a really cool character at that if you want that kind of tried and true ranged combat. Looking at the character, we can see that he has a special called Volley Fire, which essentially it outlines any non-Ogryn elite and specialist enemy as priority targets. During the stance, you deal 50% additional range damage. You have an aura that also helps out in giving small amounts of ammo whenever any of you kill an elite enemy. You have a frag grenade, and then you have 2 iconic abilities, 15% weak spot damage, as well as Be Prepared, increase ammo reserve for all ranged weapons by 40%. Now, the character of the Veteran Sharpshooter, I think, goes without explanation here. It's a pretty cut and dry character. It is a ranged combatant character. You can get up close and personal and do close combat damage. In fact, you have really good weapons that do that. You have a cool chain axe. You have a power sword you can take advantage of. All these different awesome melee weapons that really allow you to still do melee combat. And even though this game does have ranged aspects and the Veteran Sharpshooter is a ranged class, you still will be doing melee combat, especially in the higher difficulties where you just can't kill everything from range and they do close that distance. So keep those things in mind. This is a hybrid game, not a dedicated shooter. So with that kind of laid out, the kind of play style behind the Veteran Sharpshooter is really used towards focusing down specials and elites in a different way than the Psyker, which we'll go into a little bit. You are more aimed at calling them out, having a kind of overarching view of the battlefield, because you should be slightly behind people. Depending upon what feats you select as you progress through your levels of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30, you might be choosing feats that make it so that you are not moving, so that you are farther away from enemies, because there's one that says, hey, you have to be further than 8 meters away and you'll recover your toughness, stuff like that. So being that kind of character in the backline that also has a really good sight of the battlefield, has good presence and awareness of what's going on, because your big thing is going to be calling out those specials and those elites so that your Psyker can burst them down, so that your Preacher can maybe focus into them if they're a melee elite or special, or so that you can actually pop those things, or that the Ogryn can possibly charge into them or at least hold the line against them. That is your big objective here, is to really kind of maintain the awareness across everyone in your party. In addition to that, you have a ton of grenades, so you can spam your grenades constantly with the right feat setup. Lastly, when it comes to special weapons that are only accessible to the Veteran Sharpshooter in the range department, you get a plasma gun. We know you get a melta gun, but we don't know if it's relegated to the Veteran Sharpshooter or not. But that plasma gun can just straight up melt faces. You get a bunch of different options to choose from when it comes to las guns, far and away more so than almost any other human choice. So you really have these options and these different ways to play this playstyle. You can be a kind of long distance sniper. You can be a more of a mid-range automatic autogun, a fully automatic autogun user that's bursting things down. Or you can kind of be a little bit more short if you want, using stuff like auto pistols and melee weapons. So you can have that close closer combat range, but all of your abilities and the play style kind of hinges on you being that guy in the background, kind of showing everyone what's going on and really helping to pinpoint where to bring the rain. I'm going to stick with that. It's a terrible sentence, but I'm sticking with where to bring the thunder, and where to really focus things down. So if you want more of a, it's not necessarily safe because you can still get jumped from behind, but if you want a safer gameplay style that is a little bit slower and less hectic, and you want to have the time to kind of line up your shots, be the one that's kind of a Call of Duty bro in the background trying to rack up kills, the veteran sharpshooter is going to be the one for you. This does not play like Corellian in Vermintide, because Corellian I still felt would be up close and personal depending upon her subclass. With the veteran sharpshooter, you are really going to be taking a lot more of a benefit by staying backline and using your special ability and using your grenades to really help the team out. Next up is the Zealot Preacher, probably one of my favorite classes and the one that is that tried and true frontline combatant. So if you want to jump into the fray, you're going to want to do it with the Zealot here. Taking a look at the abilities and iconic and aura and whatnot, we have Chastise the Wicked, which allows the Preacher to dash forward and replenishes all their toughness, 100% of it, and increases the damage of the next melee hit by 25%, making it a guaranteed crit hit. It is one of the best abilities in the game because it basically perpetually replenishes your toughness as long as it's up. As I've said before, toughness is invaluable, especially as you go into the higher difficulties, because it is an inexhaustible resource. It's infinite, right? It'll always replenish, especially by feats, whereas your health is finite and you need to find ways to replenish it throughout the game. Looking at your iconic abilities, you have plus 10% attack speed, you have Martyrdom, which is going to increase your damage for each 15 missing health with a max stack of 3, unmodified at least. And then you have Until Death. Every 90 seconds, taking damage that would kill you, gain invulnerability for 5 seconds, and don't die. So that's nice there. You can stay up when you otherwise would have gone down. As long as you had done that within a minute and a half, you can still have that going. Martyrdom is really good too, because that's 15... You use 5 damage for each 15 missing health without that being on any kind of timer or anything. So if you have got 45 health missing, you will always have plus 15 damage. And that damage applies to both melee and to range, because the Zealot Preacher can still do good range damage. You have access to the bolt gun, which is probably one of the best range weapons, one of the most satisfying range weapons, probably the better way to put it. And you have access to the flamer, which is really, 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 really good. Even though the Zealot Preacher is a mid to close range combatant and you can use long range las guns, the range capability of the Zealot is still really strong. Again, the flamer, the bolt gun, those things help rip apart either hordes or armor depending on which one you're using. Now your aura here is going to give a toughness damage reduction, meaning that every ally in coherency with you is going to get 7% less damage towards their toughness, as long as they are again within coherency. And lastly, you've got your Blitz, which is a stun grenade. Throw a stun grenade that stuns all enemies within its blast radius. It'll also do a small damage over time, so I'm not sure if that stun includes them being bleeding or if the stun effect just naturally causes a damage over time. But that is how that works. So the Zealot Preacher itself, its play style is very up close and personal, and the feats around the playstyle are geared towards it. You have feats that make it so that if you are below a certain amount of health, you get more attack speed, you do more damage, you get more stacks of martyrdom until death will give you a health regeneration for the amount of damage you received while it was active. It just depends on the playstyle for how you want to build out your preacher. You can focus heavily on being that person who's running a baseline of like 15 health to maximize his martyrdom bonuses, maximize all the low health bonuses they can get from their feats, or you can be that Chad who is trying to just run around from point A to point B, doing as much damage as they can to armored units. The Zealot Preacher, I think, really excels in that. If the Psyker can kill any special or elite from any range, the Zealot Preacher can just absolutely destroy them within seconds if they're within close range. If you have a Thunderhammer, you've activated the Thunderhammer, you use your charge and time it right to do your Thunderhammer's charge attack, you will kill any enemy, for the exception of the Ogryn that is armored, I think it's the Crusher, and the Scab that is armored, the Mauler, within 1 hit. Those other 2 will take 2 hits. So, not that much more. So you are that kind of ultimate destructive piece of weaponry in the front line. And that's what really is fun about the Zealot, is that you have that ability to jump in and out of the fray using your special, and every time you do, it replenishes your toughness, which keeps you fighting there and longer. So if you want to play a character that is up close and it is doing the most damage in a melee, there are a lot of classes in Vermintide that are focused like this, right? That are mainly a big damage dealer in the melee department. Then this is what you're going to enjoy the most. Again, I think this is one of my favorite classes. I enjoy using stuff like the auto pistol, the flamer. The bolt gun was so satisfying on this character. The eviscerator, which is a two-handed chainsword. You get the thunder hammer. Those are 2 weapons that the Zealot only gets access to, no one else. But there is chain swords, chain axes that everyone can pick and choose depending upon what they are. So you do have a lot of the typical weaponry, but the ones that are unique to the Zealot are very strong. So again, if you want to be up close and personal, you want to do that kind of damage, get in the face of people, but also help out your team by destroying specials and elites, Zealot is going to be the one for you. Moving on to our Space Wizard, we have the Psyker. And I think that a lot of people will approach the Psyker with a fair bit of either skepticism or just not sure how to play this class. I think in closed beta, myself included, I didn't really like this class, but all of the improvements that were made to it into this stage, the class feels a lot better, it's a lot more succinct, and its playstyle is a little bit more cemented in my brain. So let's go here and take a look at the feats for our Psyker Psykinetic, and we have his ability, the Psykinetic's Wrath. This resets your peril level and stagger enemies in front of you. That doesn't sound very cool, but once you get to 30, it can actually do a devastating amount of damage and apply Soul Blaze, a ton of fun things. Then for the iconic abilities, we get Warp Siphon. Killing an enemy with Brain Burst earns Warp Charge. Each charge grants 3% damage. Warp charges are retained for 25 seconds. You can store up to 4 charges. You then can have abilities that would increase the amount of charges you can store. So that's how that works. You're pretty much bursting things heads with your Blitz. Battle Meditation, 10% chance to quell 10% peril on kill, which is lovely, which you can further increase. Kinetic Presence is your aura, which allies and coherency gain 10% damage to elite enemies, which is lovely. And then lastly, Brain Burst. Target an enemy and charge the ability to deal high damage. And that is the character. That is the character, and what they do is focusing on using Brain Burst or using their feats to trigger Brain Burst, which in which case would generate your warp charges. The different thing about the Psyker compared to all the other classes is that, the Preacher gets up close and personal and kills things. The Veteran has got to just shoot stuff. The Ogryn can hit things over the head with its shield or a grenade box. Who cares? But the Psyker is all about stacking these warp charges, generating these warp charges, bursting the brains of things around them, and it's how they really operate. And it can be a little convoluted, and especially in the early game, I think it's very difficult until you unlock feats for the Psyker. So if you're discouraged playing a Psyker and you've come to this video going, why the fuck would I even play this class? Trust me, it gets way better later on when they really start to pop off, when they get stuff like Soul Blaze. Soul Blaze is basically a a timed damage over time, a dot as it were, that does quite a bit of damage. And you can have a lot of feats that trigger Soul Blaze based off of the amount of warp charges, or if you do a Brain Burst, like I think, where is it? Damaging an enemy with your Brain Burst ability. Nope, that's not it. Killing an elite or specialist with Brain Burst applies 2 stacks of Soul Blaze to all enemies within 3 meters of the target. That gets you, get that at level 10. It's a really great ability, and it helps to clear through waves by you focusing on elites and specials. And that's what you do as the Psyker. You use the Brain Burst, because it has an unlimited range, to pop the head of both of those things. Now, there are certain elites and specials that are going to be a little bit harder for you to burst in time, like any of the mutants that are charging after you, or the dogs, the poxhounds that are just chasing you down. Those can be harder to brain burst, but you can still brain burst them pretty succinctly and easily. Pretty much everything will die from one brain burst, minus, say, I think Maulers and Ogryns maybe take 2 to 3 depending on, and of course bosses and I don't know what you would call the end of a mission boss, and then the bosses that spawn like Plague Ogryns, those definitely don't just take 2 brain bursts, but still they do a long way to contributing a lot of damage. And that's what you're going to be doing as a Psyker. You aren't necessarily strictly backline or frontline. You're mainly focused on, hey, the Veteran has pointed out a elite or special, I'm going to pop that thing's head. Or I saw it, I'm going to pop that thing's head before it does damage, like Bomber especially. If you're the Psyker, Focusing down bombers before they zone out or kill your squad is absolutely crucial. Being able to shut down any kind of stubber by charging your ability, your brain burst, in cover, popping up, looking at it, bursting its brain, then dropping back down into cover is absolutely huge once you start to hit difficulty 3, 4, and 5. I cannot tell you how crucial the Psyker is in the latter portions of the game versus in the beginning of the game. You feel like, oh, I'll never need to use this class. When you're in difficulties 1 and 2, trust me, it will change for you very fast. As far as the loadout goes, though, for the Psyker, they get access to force weapons that are amazing. The staff that can basically shoot down a thing and blow apart stuff. You saw in the trailer where you can get lightning or fire from the staff, or you have a sword that has the force sword capability to basically charge the sword up and destroy something, also brain bursting it and giving you a warp charge. So I think the Psyker is a class that has a lot of moving parts. And if you don't want to play a class that is very complex, don't play the Psyker. But if you want to play a class that is really good at destroying everything, but a little glass cannony because it doesn't have the most health, then the Psyker is going to be the one for you. You are in the front line with your force sword, or you're in the back line with your force staff. It depends on the playstyle that you want to pull from the Psyker. I personally use a force sword, and I use a specific las gun that helps me get a bunch of headshots. Those headshots equal a 10% chance to headburst someone. That headburst results in a warp charge. That warp charge can also cause a soul blaze attack. So you see that there's all these layers to the Psyker, but it is so fun and rewarding once you understand and can get these all to pop off. Last but certainly not smallest is the Ogryn. You can't even fit in the shot. And honestly, this was a class I did not think I would enjoy in Darktide, but I actually very much enjoy. So let's take a look at the feats here for our Ogryn, as they have quite a cool amount of things here. It's a class that's almost a little bit more of a support role. So the ability Bull Rush, basically they charge forward, they knock everything down, they gain attack speed and movement speed for 5 seconds. It's pretty sweet. But their iconic abilities, Thick Skin, 20% damage or toughness damage reduction, and 20% health damage reduction is great because these guys are the meat shields. Excessive Force gives you 25% melee stagger, and Loyal Protector, being damaged while reviving or assisting allies, no longer interrupts you. You can continue to do it even if you're taking damage. Their Aura increases heavy melee attack damage by 10%, and their Blitz is not a grenade, but a grenade box. You just straight up throw the box at someone, which is hilarious. But the Ogryn itself is a character that has a lot of really cool abilities. Their entire loadout is unique to them. No one else shares any weapons with the Ogryn. But the Ogryn has a shield that it can use to bash people with. It can have a heavy stubber to just lay down a ton of range fire. It has grenade gauntlets to do some grenade launcher fun, as well as punching people with them. It has a heavy mace. It has a heavy sword. It has all these crazy things. The Ripper gun is amazing. It's like playing Doom with the Ripper gun. The Ogryn has such a fun, different play style, but at the heart of it, it's about supporting those around you and keeping them in the fight by absorbing damage or by assisting your friends to help them do more damage or to keep them alive. And the cool thing about the Ogryn is, for it being this huge hulking thing, I will say that playing with more than one Ogryn on your team is really difficult when you start to get into crowded corridors, because you're just shooting the back of a bunch of Ogryns and it'll piss you off. But Ogryns have a really cool ability to essentially get stronger when people die. They have one of their feats which makes it so that it's minus 25% damage taken for each ally currently knocked down or incapacitated. So you can get minus 75% damage taken, and it's a really cool way to clutch if you're in a higher difficulty and it's like, all right, well, I got to get my bros up. I'm not going to get interrupted doing it, and I'm going to take a ton of damage doing it, but at least I get that strongly mitigated by my feats. So I think that that's what makes the Ogryn so cool, is that they are this meat shield. They do stand in the way of all this gunfire and all this additional damage, and you really need that in the higher difficulties, because you'll just get shot to death by las guns or scab gunners, scab shotguns. It's a pain in the ass. But having the Ogryn there to actually take a lot of those hits, mitigate a lot of that damage for you, is absolutely huge, because the Ogryn can sit there with their bulwark shield, drop it down, everything will start auto firing basically towards it as long as you're behind the shield in some way, shape, or form, and it gives you time for the Sharpshooter to line up shots. It gives you time for the Psyker to headburst. It gives you time for the Preacher to run in there and disrupt someone with a stun grenade or charge in all the way and stop people from firing. Remember, If you engage someone in melee, they stop firing range. It basically disrupts everyone around them. It'll pull them to you if you're in the distance. So the Ogryn is absolutely essential. And the ability to basically bolster your team or bolster it so that yourself, like I have a build that basically works on doing as much bleed damage as I can to further increase my damage or to increase my damage resistance. 10% damage resistance per bleeding enemy in melee range stacks 5 times. So I get 50% damage resistance as long as I have bleeding enemies around me. And I can stack that with stuff like the veteran's ability to have their grenades do bleeding or the preacher's ability to cause bleeding. There are so many cool ways that you can synergize with the other characters with the Ogryn in ways that you cannot with the other characters that I think makes it very fun. So if you want to be a Warhammer 40k paladin, then the Ogryn Skullbreaker is going to be for you. You can't heal, but you can definitely hold the line because they are there to absorb that fire, and it's what makes them so fun. And at that, it brings our video here to a close. So hopefully this gives you a better idea of what class you want to play. Do you want to be up close and personal, and you want to help save the day by killing elites and specials and by rushing their faces off with a Thunderhammer? The Preacher's going to be the person for you. Do you want to just snipe people from the back line? Then why don't you go with the Sharpshooter? Do you want to blow people's heads up in some of the most chaotic, synergizing feats that you can choose? Go with the Psyker. But if you want to hold the line with a bulwark and just a big old set of meaty fists, play the Ogryn. So there are plenty of different ways to approach Darktide. And in and of that, there are different ways to approach these classes. The way that you can build out a Psyker, you can do it so that they actually thrive playing a melee style class. It might not be optimal, but who the hell cares? Play the game how you want. Choose the class that you want. Don't worry about which feats are optimal or which ones are min-max. Play the game, enjoy the game, get to 30, and then once you get to 30, then worry about min-maxing or doing whatever. It costs nothing to respecialize and move your feats around. Experiment, have fun, enjoy, buy every single gun you can to try out each of these classes in the best way possible. That way, once you max everything out or max out the one character you're playing, you know exactly how you want to play them. So even though this video does kind of guide you through how I approach these classes or what most people would play these classes, play them in the way that you want because it's your game. You've spent the money and have as much fun as you can. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.